Praise be to Jesus Christ. Dear friends, I greet you and congratulate you, all of you who are here, Christians or not, and have the courage and merit, so rare today, to refuse our enslavement programmed by Islam. I greet you and I congratulate you. On this solemn day of the baptism of our plan to stop Islamization of Europe, allow me to speak to you as a Frenchman and a Christian. As a Christian, I have good reason to worry about the Islamization of Europe, since Islam is the sworn enemy of the Christian faith, which is for it the worst possible abomination, the only sin that Allah cannot forgive. Surah 4, verse 48, so that its whole purpose is to destroy and replace the Church. Surah 2, verse 193. As a Frenchman, I also have reason to worry about the allegedly neutral Republican discourse on religion. Because if we find ourselves today Islamized, it is because of the policy of unchristianization commanded by the religion of the Republic, Freemasonry, for which, as is well known, there is no truth. There is no truth, so that all religions are equal. Islam is therefore as true or absurd as Christianity, and there is no reason to treat the two differently, unless perhaps to consider that Islam, while generating a people subject to the arbitrary, cannot leave indifferent a power that is all the more totalitarian because it refuses the kingdom of Christ, for whom she justly fought. Saint Joan of Arc, who replied to her judge, asking if God did not love the English, whom she had received, she assured him, the mission to oust from France. Yes, God loves the English, but at home. The anti-Christian connivance between Islam and secularism, this perversion of the teaching of Christ distinguishing the natural and supernatural orders, also rejected by Islam, was very well expressed in a famous phrase by the mayor of Strasbourg. In the cafeteria we serve halal for the sake of diversity, but no fish on Friday, out of respect for secularism. Here is a magnificent verification of the word of Christ, who is not with me is against me. Because, unfortunately, even in the Church, welcoming Islam has often become a virtue, and denouncing it a sin. I would like to show that Stop Islamization is on the contrary a vital and urgent requirement of charity. At least that is how our fathers understood it. The kingdom of the Franks, who remained Catholic, alone, amidst nations that all became heretical, and because of that, all politically divided, pushed back the expansion of Islam, which was halted at the Battle of Poitiers. Spain, Provence, and Burgundy had become Arian, North Africa Donatist, Egypt Monophysite, Syria and Palestine Nestorian, and they all fell under the power of Islam. It is a history lesson, a sick church. An apostate people easily pass into Islam. It was popes and saints who, in accordance to the gospel, inspired the Reconquista, the Crusades, the battles of Lepanto, Belgrade and Vienna. If the Church had not inspired and supported these fights against the Muslim invasion, we would all be Muslim today. And this is what our children and grandchildren will be, if we listen to the voices of these cowards and traitors, who want to convince us that the Islamization of Europe is inevitable. For Allah's command to subdue the whole earth is imposed upon all Muslims, in return for a great reward, whether they be slain or victorious. Surah 4, verse 74. Such is the immutable word of Allah, whose customs do not change. Surah 33, verse 62. At the moment, the nations of Europe that resist Islamization are the countries that still have a strong Christian identity. Be they Greece, Serbia, Hungary, Poland, or Russia. And this, after the murderous madness of the revolution, which wanted to kill the church and make a clean sweep of the past. As if it were possible to forget history. As if Christ were nothing, but without memory. There is no identity. A slave has no identity. He is an object, and Islam, like globalism, wants to make us slaves. Firstly, of Allah, and secondly, of money. How long will it take Europeans to reject anti-Christian propaganda and stop despising Christ? We cannot serve two masters. To not want the light is to want the darkness. To reject Christ is to welcome the Antichrist. In the parable of the tares, Jesus warned us of the coming of Islam. He prophesied that after the preaching of the gospel in the field of the world, engendering the good grain of the sons of God, would come the devil, would give himself cursed offspring by sowing the tares. This plant, still called zizani, an entire program which resembles wheat, as Islam pretends to be the only true religion, and is poisonous, as Islam teaches hatred. In the name of Allah, Allah loves those who go so far as to kill for him. Surah 61, verse 4. The workers proposing to uproot this weed, the master forbade to do so, lest they at the same time tear up the good grain, for there are brave people everywhere. And Muslims are also called for salvation. If some want to lie to themselves by distinguishing a good Islam from a bad Islam, Islam from Islamism. For us the distinction is between Muslims and Islam. I love all Muslims, as they, like me, are human beings, but I hate Islam with all my soul. To eliminate Islam without hurting Muslims is the challenge that Christ confronts us with, so that our actions are irreproachable, and that we do not lose our souls, because the devil does not only want to make us suffer by imposing on us the presence of Islam, even though God certainly uses it as punishment to awaken us from the decadence into which we sink. But he wants above all, by returning evil for evil, that we become evil ourselves, and so we are damned with him. The way of salvation is narrow, it goes between to sanction the Islam and hatred of Muslims. The Apostle St. John does not betray the commandment to love our enemies when he forbids us to welcome those who refuse our faith and our culture. Second Epistle, chapter 1, verse 10. For to do so would be profitable neither to them nor to us. What St. John Paul II taught in this way: the cultural elements that immigrants carry will be respected and welcomed insofar as they do not contradict universal ethical values. Yet, Islam is incompatible with universal ethical values, as recognized by the European Court of Human Rights, declaring, as we heard, that Sharia is incompatible with the fundamental principles of our societies. That is why nobody can reproach us to want the stop of Islamization of our countries. That is why we are justified in demanding that the authorities immediately stop all help gave to the spread of Islam, in any form whatsoever. On the basis of this incompatibility of Sharia with universal ethical values, we can signal ourselves at the reception to form groups tasked with demanding, each one, the prohibition of all literature teaching the principles of Sharia, the dissolution of any organization related to the Muslim Brotherhood, such as the UOIF examining the past funding of mosques and cultural Muslim associations, the cessation of the construction of mosques, the abolition of the automatic acquisition of French nationality by the right of the soil, the abolition of dual citizenship, tougher visa standards for Muslim countries, the cessation of any military aid to Muslim groups or states, the ban on halal slaughter, the cancellation of the preferential tax regime granted to Qatari and Saudi buyers. In short, it is a matter of giving Islam the status of an enemy of the human race, which it claims. Between us and you is enmity and hatred forever, until you believe in Allah alone. Surah 60, verse 4. But for that Stop Islamization be perfect, it must go to the minds, to tear up the roots of Islam, that is to say, to the reasons Muslims have for being Muslims. And for this to show them the contradictions, lies and calumnies upon which Islam is built, so that they can freely choose to remain Muslim, or to deny Islam, to stay in Europe or to leave it. They must know that we have nothing against them, but only against the evil of which they are both the victims and the agents. While waiting for this happy day when the nation will be able to place them before this choice, it is up to us to highlight Islam among the Muslims we meet, and all those who want to persuade themselves that this is not Islam. To this end, the group Saint Michel Archangel, whom we thank for being the sponsor of this gathering, organizes training days, wherever it is called, and I myself wrote a book entitled Ask Islam, 1501 Questions to Ask Muslims. Since only the truth sets you free, let us never accept that someone praises Islam, however little it may be. No evil tree bears good fruit. Stop Islamization leads to denouncing, for example, the very common amalgam between Islam and the good that can be found among some Muslims. This good never comes from Islam, but from human nature, which was created good, so that those Muslims who do good prefer to listen to their conscience rather than to Allah. If they are called moderate Muslims, it is because, having understood that Islam is bad, they feel it necessary to moderate it, to correct it. And because they dare to criticize Allah, they are killed as renegades by Muslims who want to be true Muslims, that is, no moderate. This amalgamation between nature and religion still serves to criminalize the criticism of Islam in the name of anti-racism, as if being Muslim was a fact of nature and not of culture. In the opposite direction, it is used to denigrate the Christian faith due to bad acts committed by Christians, and to those who, in order to make us believe in the capacity of Islam to produce some good, and for that reason present us, for example, with Persian miniatures of the 14th century, we must answer that an Islamized people can never produce anything good, thanks to Islam, but always in spite of Islam. As true as the refusal of the incarnation, the visible manifestation of the truth, Islam also necessarily refuses the representation in communion with Asia Bibi and all no-Muslims, living continuously in fear of being accused and sentenced to death for blasphemy, let us proclaim loud and clear that we ourselves are blasphemers. Indeed, by the mere fact that we refuse to convert to Islam, we confess implicitly, but necessarily, that we hold Muhammad as an impostor. Otherwise we would be converted. Let us invite all no-Muslims we meet to realize that in the eyes of Allah they deserve death. Kill the unbelievers wherever you find them. Surah 4, verse 89. For their part, Christians should stop the common, yet forbidden prayers, sources of confusion, relativism, and apostasy, in the Islamic Christian encounters that give Islam the legitimacy and respectability it so badly needs. We do not have dialogue with an ideology that teaches hatred of others, killing apostates, the ontological inferiority of women and no-Muslims, pedophilia, polygamy, repudiation, slavery, bodily mutilations. It is by not maintaining the intellectual confusion that we will help Muslims and no-Muslims understand that Islam is an imposture, and all the more demonic because it claims to be divine. Islam must cease to be regarded as sacred, above all suspicion, because it is hidden behind the mask of religion, which it is not, since it does not connect to God. The reason for which it rejects nothing so much as associationism, a term by which he designates precisely the religion of God, that has come to associate us with him and with each other. Who can come after Christ, if not the Antichrist? But we can only eliminate what we replace. In 1906, Charles de Foucauld said of the Algerians, if we do not succeed in making them Christians, they will never be French, for their dogmas are opposed to it, and they will drive us away. And this is what happened 50 years later, under the auspices of the Freemason Third Republic, having prevented the evangelization of our colonies. This is how much it is true that to fight the falsehood of Islam leads to the recognition of the truth of Christianity. But what Charles de Foucauld did not foresee is that after driving the French from Algeria, the Muslims would one day be in Europe, and would Islamize it? Here is verified this other saying by Jesus, who does not gather with me, disperses. So I say to you, dear friends, if the West does not return to Christ, who gave his life for our sake, and received all power in heaven and on earth, we will not weigh against the Muslims, who are not fool enough to exchange the goods of this world against the goods of eternity. Why, just a century ago, did the Virgin to whose victories over Islam Christendom has acknowledged show hell in a place called Fatima, if not to say to the Muslims whose reason for wanting to be Muslim is to escape from hell, that Christians also believe in hell, and therefore in eternal life. If the West does not find its faith in the spiritual weapons it gives, it will not weigh against those who wager their eternity. The stakes of our life are fulfilled until eternity. This is why it is worth fighting to save it. Thank you.